everyone. Welcome to Discover Joyous Love. I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco. This is episode number 24, and the topic is, how does toxic shame affect relationships? Now, again, this is another broad topic, toxic shame. What is it? How do you get it? How do you get rid of it? What does it look like? How does it affect your relationship? This emotional debris that creeps up and surfaces when you start to get closer to a romantic partner. And as you begin to get closer and closer in the relationship, more dormant emotions surface, and this emotional debris becomes a part of what's happening in the relationship. So relationships are really, first of all, in relationships, you're supposed to be working as a team, not against each other, but with each other, and healing each other, giving each other that confidence. But sometimes when this emotional debris comes up and there's a lot of toxic shame, there's a lot of opposition and a lot of obstacles that prevent the two people from going deeper in their lovemaking, going deeper in the next step of their relationship. Because in relationships, you start out with courting, you start out with, getting to know the person. Hopefully you're not jumping right in the bed, and taking your time to get to the sexual part of the relationship. But this whole thing with emotional debris and toxic shame is very dangerous and very serious. And there is a book that I had the opportunity of studying with John Bradshaw, his book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. And he says in my statement that I'm going to put up this week, he says that, let's see here, shame is internalized when one is abandoned. Abandonment is the precise term to describe how one loses one's authentic self and ceases to exist psychologically. John Bradshaw, Healing the Shame That Binds You. And he talks a lot about addictions. Shame is the heartbeat of addiction. Shame and hiding is what I've always said. When people put a lid on you, or people can't face you or express who they are, or they have this thing about them that they don't want to accept or look at, or they feel bad about. And this is shame. They're hiding the shame. But there is a difference between shame and ashamed. Now, I know there was a song out by the Spinners. It's a shame. A shame is something that you do wrong. You did something and you feel ashamed about it. You stole something in a store and you feel ashamed about it. Shame is much more emotionally, somatically connected to the body, mind, and spirit, and generally derives from the roots of our childhood and psychosexual development. So the shame is much different than a shame. A shame is just you've done something bad. You cursed at an older person. Ooh, that's a shame. Or you slept late and you missed the party, so to speak, or whatever, the great job or whatever. And that's a shame. But that's not shame. So they are different. I'll talk about them. So let me get into shame. People that have shame need to work in what we call the shadow work, to start to tap into the shadow, the shadow that is your trauma that you live with, that part of you that's dormant. It's a self-conscious emotion and informs us of an internal state of inadequacy, worthiness, regret, or disconnection. So shame lives around the people that experience the low self-worthiness, or the low self-esteem, or it comes from abandonment or being neglected in any way in your life, not necessarily as a child, just in anything. Maybe your friends, they kick you off to the curb. They're your friend today, they're not your friend tomorrow. And that happens in relationships. And so, these are patterns in the body. So it becomes clear that it's a disconnection, and the shame is what's starting to govern you now. It's a clear signal that our positive feelings have been interrupted. Your positive feelings. So take a look at your positive feelings. Do you have positive feelings? Do you emote and optimize and connect to the not the better things in life, but the things that are positive, that are, it's a rainy day, but it's a bad day. If it's a rainy day, it's a beautiful day, because every day is a beautiful day. So when people connect to, say, a rainy day, it's a bad day, then all of a sudden they're going into reducing the positive part of them. It's a pattern, again, another pattern, and triggers. So people that have a lot of toxic shame are triggered very easily, emotionally. What toxic shame is: a concealed, contagious, and dangerous emotion. Concealed, contagious, and dangerous emotion. Shame can lead us to feel as though our whole self is flawed, is bad. So if you have this shame, you may feel like the part of you is belittled. You're belittled, you're condescended, or maybe someone belittled you and condescended you with negative speech and putting the lid on you, so to speak. And so we always feel, if you have this toxic shame, that you're flawed, you're bad, and you're always seeking to possibly be accepted by others out there and even yourself. Shame keeps one stuck in the past. So I see a lot of shame and hiding in people. I read it in their body language, in their gestures, and in the way they look at you with their eyes. Being a psychotherapist and a love and relationship coach, founder of Tantra Wisdom and Discover Joyous Love, this podcast, I start to study people's gestures, the way they walk, the way their eyes are, the way their lips move. And this is part of my dance movement therapy background, learning about the gestures of the body, which I have become so enlightened and so connected to, that I'm able to actually sense, even if someone is wearing a belt, and what they have around their body, just the whole energy of the somatic body. It's just wonderful to be able to see those things. And partly it's a developed perceptiveness, a developed intuitiveness as well. Now, shame avoidance leads to withdrawal or addictions that attempt to mask its impact. So people that suffer from addiction, say love and sex addicts, NA, narcotics, or AA, or any type of addiction out there, they tend to want to mask the impact of the shame, because the shame keeps them lowly, so to speak. And it has a lot of guilt, and it leads to a hiding type of character. They'd be the type that wouldn't look in the eyes. They would have armor. They would have sexual armor. They would have armor in the eyes. They may not look directly at you because they feel like they can't, because they're hiding. And a lot of it stems, again, from the childhood. Attacking others helps the shamed person disown it. So be aware of the toxic shame in your romantic relationship, that your partner is suffering from toxic shame. They will attack you. They will belittle you. They will make you feel what they're feeling in projecting that onto you, that you become the one that is the shame after a while. So they disown it that way. Again, they shift it, but it's all false. Belittling others to feel confident. So it becomes their pseudo-ego power. They're relocating one's own shame into another. This is called transference. So you have transference, right, that we pick up biologically from people that we're close with, or people that we work around, or more even so, our family members, our blood family members. It's just another typical self. Shame is a typical self-protective manner among narcissists. So the shame, usually a lot of toxic shame exists in the narcissistic personality, and they use the toxic shame to cover up the narcissism. Its internalized shame is denied. So the denial becomes the character. Control becomes the character. Avoidance becomes the character. Shame is toxic because it's hidden, it's concealed. Imagine this dormant part of yourself that is shut down, that is frozen. Let's wake it up. I'm here to tell you that you can. I suffered from some toxic shame and hiding as a young child growing up, not what caused my toxic shame was that I came from a family where there was domestic violence. And I would go into the world, and that would make me feel not ashamed because I didn't do anything bad. It would make me feel shame for what I was living with and experiencing, coming home to parents that were physically abusing each other. And so this is where a lot of the foundation of shame begins, in uprooted into whatever the family foundation is. Shame is toxic, again, because it's hidden, concealed. And there you go, it's the transference. The shadow and the body memories. So what happens is we are living in that shadow. Let's take that shadow and let's become one with the shadow. The body remembers everything. Remember, the body remembers things, and that's how we become triggered. But if we open up those patterns and we heal those patterns and we release them emotionally through anger, cleansing work, Dr. Wilhelm Reich's work that I practice, I'm a Reichian orgonomy somatic psychotherapist, where I address the body brain in the sense of more so than the mind, to get to the emotions quicker. And the body memories are in your cells, in your nervous system. Toxic shame, a feeling of worthlessness. When others belittle you, it becomes a belief about the self. So be careful if you're in that, if your mate is a toxic shame person. And how do you see it? Well, if you start to believe that the belittling that person projects upon you and that condescending attitude, and you start to believe that about yourself, that is a red flag that your partner suffers from toxic shame. That's one. Shame and guilt are different. The difference between them: guilt is when you know you did something wrong, like you robbed the bank and now you're guilty. You stole something in a store, you're guilty. Shame, when you feel you're not enough, goes back to that deep set emotions because of negative people who belittled and condescended you. So the toxic shame person received a lot of negative input as a child, that, or somewhere along the line from a partner or something, or on a job. They were just constantly targeted and criticized, and that critical voice, took them over. And one's confidence suffers then when you have toxic shame. So you become some people can become overdeveloped in the ego as to be looking like they have all this confidence, but inside they're very passive, they're suffering, and they are very sad inside. They are a little hurt boy or girl. And the one's confidence suffers because of this deep-seated emotion, which can affect the way you see yourself. Look in the mirror and see what you see. Guilt says the thing you did was wrong. So you robbed the bank. Well, you're guilty. You cheated on your mate. You better be guilty. Shame says because you did that thing, you are a bad person. That's what shame will say. Toxic shame is that repeated head chatter that says you're not enough. You're not good enough. You can't do anything. These are the words that shout out in the head that we live with, this chatter, this noise. So we've got to get rid of it, folks, and I can show you how. Starts in childhood, in the way you were given the feedback. How did your parents give you feedback? Oh, you're not good enough, or you never do anything right. How about that? You're trying your best to do something, or help mom in the kitchen. You never do it right. So when they come back with that negative, that negative projection, that negative feedback, this is where the shame can start as well. Lashing. What's wrong with you? That's another thing a lot of parents say to their children. You'll never be as good as them, or you'll never be as good as me. So these are things that, or maybe it's part of their control issues and part of their insecurity issues and part of their issues in not wanting to see you detach from them. So there's a lot of attachment issues here. It translates to you, the person receiving it, I'm not worthy of love, and holding on to unworthiness, feelings of shame, and it's behind. So what happens is the character isolates, you withdraw, then you become this angered, chip on the shoulder type person. So you're constantly discharging anger, or you're just not happy, you're just not happy. And those kind of feelings, they shape you. They shape who you are. But we can fix this. It's really not that hard. You just have to want to do the work. It's an escape. Now, how do you recover from the toxic shame? A lot of toxic shame requires mindfulness, spirituality. Some people, because of the emotional neglect as a child, they didn't receive the attention, and there wasn't a lot of emotional expression or connection. There was a lot of emotional neglect and abandonment, feeling left out. Love wasn't there. So to recover from toxic shame, we have to start to go to therapy to begin with and work the emotions and start to process the emotions and start to get into groups and start to connect with people and allow yourself to feel part of the circle rather than looking from the outside in. Be in the circle rather than the outside. And it takes work. I teach dance therapy and Tantra classes and all of these things. And the love, when we start to practice talking and communicating in group therapies and Tantra, my Tantra workshops are group therapy, basically, psychological group therapy, to help people to open up to the heart that became frozen and shut down and cut off, and open that part of themselves so that they could not be so isolated and they can have a life again. Now, ashamed is a feeling that comes with remorse, comes with a sense of inferiority or regret due to some stupid actions. Again, like you robbed the bank. That's a shame. Or you cut school, right? And you feel ashamed about it. Ooh, you played hooky today or whatever. And so, but shame is different. Shame, a feeling of embarrassment and guilt. Self-hate. Being ashamed is the act of feeling shame due to a particular thing. Shame is succeeded by anxiety and emotional distress. So if you have shame, you're going to be sure to have tension, anxiety, and emotional distress. Going back to ashamed, being ashamed causes withdrawal from things that might lead to create a particular situation. One last thing here I'd like to say on shame: a self-conscious emotion associated with withdrawal and worthlessness. So take a look between you and your partner, sit down and start to see if there are any red flags here. Do either one of you, or do you feel that your partner belittles you? Do you feel that your partner has a sense of worthlessness or low self-esteem? So a lot of these things, the toxic shame, do they have abandonment issues in their life? Look at the patterns, look at what happens in their life and the repetitiveness around them that goes on. It's not that hard to see the toxic shame, but my advice to you is to first start therapy, but first start to read John Bradshaw's book. His book, let's see the name of his book again. It's Healing the Shame That Binds You. And I had the opportunity to study and meet with him way back in the day when he was just new on the scene with that book. And I'll tell you, that was a deal breaker for me. That was the turning point of my life. One of the turning points. I've had many awakenings and turning points, but his book in particular is one. And people who have addictions should really read it, because he talks a lot about addictions. He says shame is a healthy emotion, but for addicts, shame is an emotion that festers. It destroys our ability to love, to find happiness, to be spontaneous, and it reinforces feelings of self-loathing and unworthiness. In recovery, people that go to 12-step meetings, they learn to admit our defects and make amends, to identify the trauma and pain we have experienced and which we have caused. In Bradshaw's, the groundbreaking book, which is an old book now, we learn how to rid ourselves of the toxic shame, to experience shame as a healthy emotion. Shame can be a healthy emotion, so keep that in mind. Essential to our recovery, in addition to everything else, right? Healthy shame reinforces our sense of self and worthiness, allowing us to acknowledge and defend our boundaries, to feel happiness and pleasure in a life of sobriety. So I'm going to leave you on this. Thank you for tuning in to discoverjoyouslove.com. You can find me there, tantrawisdom.com, all the same website. I have 2 books, Live Free, which can be found on Amazon, and my other book, The Donna Gentile Story, a true crime book about a woman who was murdered, and it's just a fantastic book. If you're into true crime, you want to read that. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any other questions, you could find me and send me a note.